Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at her reflection in the restaurant's bathroom mirror, mascara threatening to smudge beneath her eyes. Through the thin walls, she could hear her coworkers, cruel laughter echoing from their table across the dining room. They thought she couldn't hear them, thought she was still naive enough to believe this blind date was genuine. But 20 minutes of waiting alone at table 12 had been enough time to piece together their vicious prank. The successful businessman they'd promised would never show. He probably didn't even exist. What hurt most wasn't the humiliation. It was the reminder that even at 28, even after years of proving herself as the most dedicated teacher at Lincoln Elementary, she was still seen as the awkward girl who ate lunch alone, the one they could use for entertainment when their own lives felt boring. Sarah dabbed her eyes with a paper towel and made a decision. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She'd walk out that door with her head high, drive home to her small apartment, and pretend this night never happened. But as she pushed open the bathroom door, a commotion near the restaurant's entrance made her pause. "Daddy, you promised we could get ice cream after." A little girl's voice carried across the room, high-pitched with the special kind of exhaustion that came after a long day. "We will, sweetheart. Just let Daddy handle this work call first." The man's voice was warm but strained, and Sarah found herself glancing toward the source. A tall figure in a slightly wrinkled suit knelt beside a girl who couldn't have been more than 6, her dark curls escaping from what had probably started as neat pigtails. The hostess approached them with barely concealed impatience. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we don't allow children to wait in the lobby unaccompanied. If you're not dining—" "Actually, I think I have a reservation." The man stood, running a hand through his dark hair as he balanced his phone against his ear with his shoulder. "Marcus Chen, my assistant called earlier about changing the time." Sarah watched the hostess check her list, her expression growing more skeptical. The little girl tugged on her father's jacket, and he looked down with the kind of exhausted patience that spoke of single parenthood and too many 18-hour days. From across the restaurant, Sarah heard Jessica's voice rise above the ambient noise. "Oh my God! Do you think she actually believes he's coming? This is even better than we thought." Something shifted in Sarah's chest. Not just anger at her coworkers, but recognition of a different kind of loneliness in the man and his daughter. Without fully understanding why, she walked toward them. "Marcus?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The man turned, and Sarah found herself looking into the most genuinely surprised brown eyes she'd ever seen. He was handsome in an understated way, with the kind of face that suggested kindness before confidence. "I'm sorry, he began, but Sarah pressed on. "I'm Sarah, from the elementary school fundraiser committee." She improvised quickly, noting how his daughter perked up at the mention of school. "We were supposed to meet about the playground renovation project." Understanding flickered in Marcus's eyes, followed by something that might have been gratitude. He glanced down at his daughter, then back at Sarah. "Of course," he said slowly. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Emma had a dance recital that ran over, and then there was an issue at the office." "Daddy builds buildings," Emma announced proudly, apparently deciding Sarah was worth her attention. "Really big ones. And he said if I was good today, we could get ice cream with rainbow sprinkles." "Did he now?" Sarah knelt to Emma's level, and the little girl's face lit up with the kind of unguarded joy that reminded Sarah why she'd become a teacher in the first place. "Well, that sounds like the best kind of reward for being good at a dance recital." "The hostess says they have a special kids menu," Marcus said, his voice carrying a note of hope. "If you don't mind eating with a 6-year-old food critic who considers chicken nuggets the height of culinary achievement." Sarah glanced back toward her co-worker's table, where Jessica was craning her neck to see what was happening. The sight strengthened her resolve. "I would love to," she said, meaning it more than she'd meant anything in months. The hostess, clearly relieved to resolve the situation, led them to a corner booth, where Emma immediately began arranging the crayons from the kids' activity pack in order of preference. Marcus slid into the seat across from Sarah, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. "Thank you," he said quietly while Emma was distracted by her coloring. "I know this isn't whatever you were expecting tonight." Sarah almost laughed at the understatement. "Actually, this is exactly what I needed." Over the next 2 hours, Sarah discovered that Marcus Chen wasn't just any businessman. He was the CEO of Chen Development, the company responsible for half the new construction in the city. But more importantly, he was a father who carried photos of Emma's artwork in his wallet and knew the names of all her stuffed animals. Emma, meanwhile, decided that Sarah was almost as pretty as Princess Belle and insisted on sharing her chicken nuggets because sharing makes food taste better. As they talked, Sarah found herself forgetting about the cruel prank, forgetting about her coworkers, who were probably wondering why she was suddenly having dinner with strangers instead of fleeing in embarrassment. She was too caught up in Marcus's story about taking over his father's construction company at 25 while simultaneously becoming a single parent, and too charmed by Emma's detailed explanation of why purple was scientifically the best color. "Miss Sarah," Emma said suddenly, looking up from her coloring page of a castle, "do you like my daddy?" "Emma!" Marcus's face reddened, but Sarah just smiled. "I think your daddy is pretty wonderful," she said honestly. Any father who keeps rainbow sprinkle ice cream promises is definitely a keeper. It was Emma who insisted they all get ice cream together at the parlor next door. It was Emma who fell asleep against Sarah's shoulder while they sat on a bench outside, sticky-fingered and content. And it was Emma who, in the innocent way of children, made the observation that would change everything. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "Miss Sarah makes you smile the way Mommy used to." Marcus went very still. Sarah felt him tense beside her, saw the flash of old pain cross his features. "Emma's mother died when she was 2, he said quietly, his eyes fixed on his daughter's peaceful face. "Car accident. I don't usually—" "You don't have to explain," Sarah said gently. "Thank you for trusting me with tonight." With her? Marcus looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "I know this is going to sound crazy," he said, "but I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone who would be kind to my daughter without expecting anything in return." "That's not crazy at all," Sarah whispered. "It's love." The word hung in the air between them, surprising them both with its truth. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the same restaurant, but this time she wasn't alone at table 12. She was surrounded by friends, real friends, including several parents from Emma's school who had become like family. Marcus had flown back early from a business trip to make their 6-month anniversary dinner, and Emma was spending the night with her grandmother, giving the adults a rare evening alone. Sarah was laughing at something Marcus was saying when she noticed the familiar faces at a table across the room. Jessica and the others from her old job, the same group who had orchestrated that cruel blind date prank. They were staring at her with expressions of shock and something that might have been envy. "You know," Marcus said, following her gaze, "I never did ask you about that night we met. You said you were there about a fundraiser, but—" Sarah was about to finally tell him the truth when Marcus suddenly stood up, his face pale. For a moment, she thought something was wrong. Then she saw him reach into his jacket pocket. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet restaurant. "I know we haven't been together long, but I also know that some things are worth waiting your whole life for, and other things you recognize the moment they happen." The small velvet box in his hand seemed to glow under the restaurant lights. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as Marcus dropped to one knee beside their table. "You loved my daughter before you loved me," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "You showed kindness to strangers without asking for anything in return. You make us both better than we ever thought we could be." His voice cracked slightly. "Will you marry us, Sarah? Will you be Emma's mom and my wife and let us love you for the rest of our lives?" The restaurant fell completely silent. Sarah was dimly aware of phones being raised to record the moment, of her former co-workers' shocked faces, of the hostess wiping tears from her eyes. But all she could see was Marcus, this man who had somehow found her on the worst night she'd thought she was having and turned it into the beginning of everything. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and the restaurant erupted in applause, Sarah caught Jessica's eye across the room. For just a moment, she felt a flicker of the old hurt. Then Marcus pulled her into his arms, and she realized that the cruelest prank of her life had actually been the greatest gift. Sometimes the worst nights lead to the best mornings. Sometimes being stood up leads to being found. And sometimes, when people try to break your spirit, the universe responds by giving you exactly what you never knew you were looking for. The joke. Sarah realized as she kissed her fiancé, while strangers cheered around them, had been on everyone but her.